Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the February user group. My name is Fabiola Flores, and I am going to be walking you through the agenda this morning. Thank you for making the time to come listen to what we have for you. We have a full agenda. This morning, we're going to be walking you through some updates for Workday Payroll Project, and Andy is here for Oregon Buys updates. Then we have some information about system-generated batches that are important, and it's going to be an interesting conversation because we have batches that you enter, but then we have system-generated batches. Then we have information about the expedite warrant pickup. We actually can issue a check same day if you enter it into the system by a certain time. Not a lot of people use that, but it is available if you have like an emergency warrant that you need to issue. 1099 update, because that just happened last month, so we want to give you some information. Then we have the Treasury account close request. We have a new form to show you when you need to close Treasury accounts. We have the payment control archive. Then we have the payment control archive starts our system jobs. So SFMS, we have about 14 system events every year that clean our data, that archive our data, that keep our system running smoothly. And we start in February. So we walk you through all of those because those are happening in the background. While you're just using the system in the front, entering your transactions, we are keeping the data clean and archived. So we're doing that on the back end. So the payment control archive is the first job that we start with in the year, and we do this every year. And then the financial archive is actually our biggest job that we have. It takes the whole team because what we're doing is we're archiving a year worth of all of the transactions in the system, but we cannot archive just, based on fiscal year because we have capital construction appropriations that we have to keep for 6 years. So it's an extensive job to just go in and archive a certain amount of transactions. And it takes us the whole team. It's the biggest job we have. And in let's see, we don't really need that much agency responsibilities, but we need you to be aware of that. So we'll walk you through that. Profile archive is another job that we do every year. Not every year, every other year. The other one is every other year is a profile archive. Again, we're trying to clean the system so you have what you need available to you. And then the vendor purge, we do that one every year to clean our vendor profiles. And you'll see a lot of statistics and graphs about this, so you know what the system holds. It's important because we're all using it. We have 1,400 users in the system, so it's just important for you to know some of the specifics that happen. And then, like every user group, we do an R-Star screen highlight. Today, we're going to highlight screen 13. Some of you guys will use it, some of you will not. SFMS has about 100 screens, and not everybody knows the screen. So at each user group, we try to just highlight one and just let you know what's in there. So in case you ever, someone's talking about the 13 screen, that that's deposits, what information it holds. So we'll be doing that. And then every user group, we do a DAFR highlight, because I don't know if you guys know, but we have about 150 reports, DAFR reports that we run every day, and it breaks down your information all kinds of different ways. Yes, it's easy to run a OB query or something else, a reporting tool, which is fine, but the DAFR highlight is an ability for you to know what is already there, like what we're producing every single day or every month. And but there's about 150 DAFR reports that can get produced. Then error messages, I think it's important because if you're a new user and you hit that error, it always feels like, oh no, I broke the system. Oh no, what does this mean? And our system is very intuitive. And so once you just understand where you go find the answer, it will be helpful. But when you get those errors, it might seem a little daunting, but we're going to walk you through it. So rest assured, you will know what the errors mean. And then the last piece, we have not done this one for a while, is user classes, but I think it's very important for new people in the system to understand their user classes and why we set them up the way we set them up, where you can go look for information, how does the user classes work. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer to start with our Workday payroll updates.
Okay, thank you. Hi, I'm Jennifer Taylor. And so this is a slide we've been seeing pretty much every user group, but we want to talk about it, especially since we just recently saw the change. Moving from OSPA to Workday, we decided that every other year, the run indicator was going to change from alpha to numeric. So even years, which we're in now, it is going to be an alpha. So run 1 will end in an A and run 2 will end in a B. There's a few reasons for this. Every few years, we had an issue with HEM popping up, where HEM normally posts forward for the agency that it posts on, which is agency 443. And well, when July 1st is on a weekend, it pays out prior to that. And so we had some conflicts. Additionally, the T code 851, we moved that to posting on the effective date of those transactions on the day the checks were cut. So it prevents any duplicates from year to year. And so we're going to talk about Workday data not sent to SFMA. This is something we've been dealing with since we found the issue. So it's primarily data processed for a month after run 1 has completed. So primarily cancellations or manual checks prior to month end. So especially those last few days. Right now we're processing quarterly corrections until this is resolved on the Workday side. So we did a December 22 to June 23 that was processed on 9/1 with an effective date of August 1st and a report effective date in OB of 9/1. Then we did a July to September catch up. So it's everything that wasn't picked up after we processed the first one through September. That was processed on the 10th or the 11th of October with an effective date of 9/30 and a report effective date of OB of 10/10. Just a note on this, and this is something we are watching for in the future, is that report effective date. It's really hard to tell which is the quarterly catch-up and which is the September run 2. So going forward after that, we are making sure that the report effective date for the quarterly catch-up is different than the run 2. The next one we've got is September to December that was processed on 1/17 with an effective date of 1/1 and a report effective date of 1/20. So the tentative plan is to process these quarterly, ideally coinciding with quarter end. So the next one will come up on in April that runs through March run 2. And it will, ideally, we will be processing the day before the March run 2 comes in when everything in Workday is shut down. And the goal is to have that as the report effective date. Some of these, specifically the September through December, got processed a little late just because of timing. It was a short SFMS close, and so we wanted to be conscious of giving everybody that +1 day where it sits on the 5:30 screen and they can make edits prior to it actually processing. And with the close schedule and the timing of when we got the file, it was just a little too late to squeak it in for December close. So I don't think we have an issue with that this year in the months that we're planning on processing though. So let's see. So we've got some known Workday issues. One we've got with costing overrides, where the hours in the CECD don't match the submitted in SFMA, and it's overcosting those overrides. Specifically, there were two codes, one of which is overtime, and the other that is affects less agencies is premium fire. Workday has been testing a solution. We think they've got part of the issue solved, and I think they're planning on initially moving that into production for sometime in February, is my understanding. But we will update you on the May user group as far as where we are on that. Also reports, we've been dealing with some issues of the data in the payroll register doesn't match between pay results and the pay register. We think we have that nailed down to it's duplicating some info from run 2 to run 1. And then also the logic between employer paid and employee paid logic. That is something I think we've got fixed in on the Workday side. We know the logic, it just has to be pushed out to, I think, Datamart, if I remember correctly. And then we've got timesheet with tracking and costing overrides. These are some reports that we're looking at. There is a work group on this so that people can look at those have a better view of their costing overrides, and also who entered, who approved, when it was entered, when it was approved, all of that information that you're going to need for audit questions. And then also a costing preview. So something that was recently completed is Agency Object 9999. And all of the data has been corrected in SFMS at this point. So it's in SFMS. We did have an issue with these were being excluded from the SFMS interface. That's all cleaned up, as well as the OB information where it was viewed. That data has also been cleaned up at this point. So if you do a query on Agency Object 9999, then you should no longer see anything. So on the labor costing, OPE. So a lot of you have been seeing emails and been in meetings on the OPE labor costing reallocation. So we're looking at a system resolution. Phase 1A was already completed. That was the data cleanup from March to June 2023. And that data was loaded based on agency approval on 12/4 and 12/6, depending on if your agency had edits or not. Phase 1B has also been completed. That data cleanup from July through November 2023, that was also loaded based on agency approval, and it was loaded on 1/26. We did not allow any edits to that. However, if your agency had any questions on doing some updates using the 54B screen, we are happy to help with that. We're moving into phase 2, where they'll be testing and validating scenarios to implement the automated process. There is a payroll and finance participation needed on both sides of it. And that every agency is going to have to sign off on it. There's a couple scenarios for agencies that don't do many cost overrides that you'll still need to test because we still need your approval. I do see a question on the approximate timeline of phase 2. I know last week a presentation was done on Wednesday on the timeline, at least for the initial test, and I'd have to double check on that. So I'll note your name, and I'll forward you the presentation. And if you have any questions on this, you can also contact Rhonda Bachman or Deanna Harris. The email that had the timeline would have come out from them. So, okay. If you have accounting issues for Workday payroll, we're requesting you submit a case in Workday. So to do that, you can actually type case into the search bar, and one of the options will be create case. Please include any necessary documentation you've got, examples, specifically ORID is really helpful, and the month and run it occurred on. If you can include some screenshots, that's also really helpful. But additionally, when it impacts agency accounting, we want to know about it so that we can help advocate for those corrections. I included the SFMS payroll data email there. And that will help us just sort of track what issues have come up with the agencies and where we need to advocate for you. So yeah. Several links for dates. So we've got the SFMS calendar that has, when the payroll loads are. And this is for the Workday data in OB. I know Erin has recently put together a link to that calendar that we had last year that we talked about in so I think that's now available on the Workday or on the OB page. I will add the link in the chat shortly after this. The data mart calendar also essentially has this, where the CECD is the period end date, and that's the pay period ending. And the report effective date is the date it was loaded to the data mart on the data mart calendar, noted on the data mart as the Workday load, and on the SFMS calendar as Workday payroll load SFMA. But I will add the new link to the chat once I finish presenting. Any questions?
We haven't had any other questions come in, Jennifer.
Okay, perfect. Next, we have Andy Kizza from the Oregon Buys Project.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Let's see. There I am. Okay, thank you for having us today from the Oregon Buys Project. Yes, I'm Andy Kizza. I'm the program administrator and on the DAS e-procurement team. And we have just a couple of slides to share with you today. So let's talk about our project status update. We have state agencies fully implemented with procure to pay functionality that utilizes interfaces between Oregon Buys and the R-Stars financial system. So the project has concluded its enterprise work for both Orphan replacement and the new procure to pay functionality. So we can do requisitions and purchase orders, receipts and invoices all through Oregon Buys. So my team, the e-procurement team, is responsible for administering the program, but Periscope is contracted out. They're the vendor of Oregon Buys, and they provide user support, and their information is in that third bullet. And then we just wanted to share a little bit about how what we've seen for utilization of the system since the agencies have gone live. So you can see from kind of the graph below, we're trickling in under 500 documents, transactions a month through wave 1. And then when wave 2 went live in May of last year, we saw that increase. and again in wave 3. And then the biggest increase has come from ODOT, which is obviously not on the R-Stars financial system. So those last couple bars on the right, it's probably about a 50-50 split, because we see, over 1,000 transactions a month now, but a good chunk of those are ODOT, but we are seeing close to that amount come through R-Stars. So we've had 55 agencies do requisitions, 39 do purchase orders, totaling a little over $700 million. And of those, we've actually had 33 agencies go through the whole process and have paid out 9,000 invoices, totaling 136 million. So business is really picking up in organ buys, and we're excited about that, as it was a long time coming in the implementation. But we now have agencies on board. But if there are questions about, business processes or things you need from DAS, you can contact us at the e-procurement. Or if you're just stuck on a document and need, kind of first tier level support, you're welcome to contact Periscope for that information. We are making a couple of updates to the R-Stars interface, and we expect to see these probably within the next 4 to 6 weeks in the system. They're kind of in the final phases of testing. This slide is a little bit incorrect, because it says they were deployed. They were deployed to the UAT region. We thought we were going to have them done in January, but we had a slight delay. But we'll probably see them, by the end of this month or perhaps early March. But the 3 things that you might notice is your transactions will be sorted by the VU number, which is going to be a good update and make things easier to read in the system. And then we're going to utilize the multi-purpose code field and automatically send the PO numbers from organ buys into R-Stars. And what's exciting about that is we know there is the weekly communication between R-Stars and the data mart, so that the week following your transaction in R-Stars, that information will be queryable in the data mart. And so that's kind of a much requested change, and we think that's going to be a good update. And then lastly, we are standing up a batch agency for DHS and OHA. So that one's only going to affect those agencies, but their transactions will all be grouped together, which will be a good change. So we will send some information when these changes are final, but we're in the kind of the last stages of testing, and we haven't had any hiccups on those 3. And so we expect deployment here pretty soon. We wanted to follow up, a lot of the people here went through our process design sessions and our end user training as part of the project. But we do have ongoing training available. There are self-guided courses on our website, and I believe they all link into Workday Learning now. The training is split up essentially by the role of the user. So for this group, the accounts payable training is probably the most applicable, but we know there's a little bit of crossover sometimes. And so if you want to see what your procurement staff is looking at, there's basic purchasing training. There's department access training, which is kind of the end users who are just the support staff who are maybe purchasing office supplies, things like that. That's who we see as a department access user. And then organization administrators, which typically reside in an agency's IT department or with DAS on the e-procurement team. And then we wanted to talk about kind of the main one of the issues we are seeing that agencies are encountering, which is we know that an invoice is sent directly from organ buys to R-Stars. But when that invoice comes into R-Stars, it comes in on the hold status. So you can verify all of the information came over correctly, and then will be available in to release. And then once you release it from R-Stars, then that information will flow that night back into Oregon Buys, which allows Oregon Buys to import the check number and the payment details, as well as change the status of the invoice from approved for payment to reflecting that it's been paid. But when you get to the 530 screen or your transaction and hold status, you are able to update some information. And depending on what updates you make on the 530 screen, would then cause that what we call the check import utility, which is the payment file going from R-Stars back into Oregon Buys, to not find a match because you've made that update on the 530 screen. So we've seen that a little bit. And then in that case, the payment information doesn't come in on the invoice in Oregon Buys, and it won't show as paid, even though it's been paid out in R-Stars. And again, that's just because it's not, seeing the exact match. But we did publish instructions, and those are available as a clickable link. So if you do encounter this where you make a change on the 530 screen, you can mark your invoice in Oregon Buys as paid manually, which will then have all of the information, so it won't look like it's still awaiting payment. But take a look at those instructions anytime you need to make a change on the 530 screen, because what came over from Oregon Buys isn't what you were expecting, or there was an input error or something like that. But it is a good way to be able to make changes, one last time before the payment goes out, without having to redo the entirety of your Oregon Buys transaction. If you have any questions about this, we are again available at the e-procurement team, and our websites below, or our email addresses at the bottom of the slide, as well as we coordinate with the R-Stars team on these issues. With that, that is the end of the slides I have. I do see a question in the chat. So let me pull this up real quick. Does the change need to be made by AP or the AP supervisor? And whomever has access to do that release in the 530 screen can make those updates. So that's why. Does this apply to ODOT too? No, ODOT is going to be separate because they are on their team's financial system. So we would have to work directly with the people at ODOT who are working the team's integration. So these updates are only for R-Stars agencies. Let's see, the multi-purpose code field in R-Stars has a limited number of characters. Well, some PO numbers are really long. So will the system be sending just the last digits from the PO? Essentially, we have concatenated the purchase order number. So instead of saying, because right now it says PO dash, and then your agency number, and then a dash, and then probably some zeros, and then it gets to the PO number. We have shortened that so it will fit in the multi-purpose code field, essentially just seeing that last string of that. So you are able to match them back and forth, but the information that comes over is not, it's not the full string that we see in the Oregon Buys PO number, but that's a great question. And then for the agencies using the multi-purpose code field for other things, that's why we're trying to disseminate this information and share in advance, so that this doesn't affect any existing business processes. I think for those agencies who are using that multi-purpose code field for something else, you are still able to update it on the 530 screen. So if you don't want it'll automatically be populated with that shortened PO number from Oregon Buys. But if you want it to have something different, you can make that update on the 530 screen. And that is not something that would affect the interface coming back. So it wouldn't result in any of the issues that we raised in that last slide. And let's see, I think those are all the questions from chat. Real quick, a UC17 with account trans indicator of 3 or 4 can make changes to an organ-wise type E batch. Okay, so those are the users who can make changes. Thank you, Liz. And what is being done regarding organ buys not sending over the PDT, MA, or DA field information into RStars? We are seeing blank PDT fields after the interface from organ buys. That is a good question, Brandon, and I do not have an answer to that. But what I can do is take a note and follow up with you offline, as I am unfamiliar with that issue.
And Andy, this is Liz Schultz. The way we design the organ buys interface to RStars is it will come over blank, but the PDT will be pulled in based on the vendor profile. So if the vendor has been set up in RStars to have direct deposit, it'll automatically do direct deposit. If they've been set up with a mail PDT, it'll be pulled in that way. If an agency needs to change it, they can update it if they need to return it to the agency on the 530 screen. So that's just a little bit more information on that PDT field. I don't know if, Brandon, that addresses your specific concern, but when it first comes across, the PDT will be blank and it will be pulled in from whatever's on the vendor profile.
Perfect. Thank you, Liz.
And
Okay,
we do have
there's
one
no more
last
question.
one
Oh,
last
yep, sorry.
question. One last question for you, Andy. They want to know if they have questions, do they contact you specifically directly via email, or is there a distribution mailbox that you would prefer to use?
The best box to use is the e.procurement@das.oregon.gov, which we can see at the bottom of this slide. But if anyone wants to reach out to me directly, I have no objections to that. So, but the easiest way for us to triage those and work them is to reach out to that e-procurement mailbox, and we'll make sure and get those responded.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us today, Andy.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
All right. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and turn the floor over to Maria, and she is going to cover some system generated batches.
Hi and good morning, everyone. We are going to talk about system generated batches. First, I like to talk about a little bit about batches, because sometimes the simple subject will turn to a mystery on 530 screen. So we do nightly batch cycles, as everybody knows. Our cycles run in 2 parts. Cycle 1 process payments and edits and any updates was applied to the transactions during the day. And so cycle 2 will do the interface extract and reportings. And here's a simple graph will show when users creating the batch on 500 screen, based on the batch type, it will be picked on that screen. System will drive you to different screens. And here we have a list of the all batch types. So it depends on what transaction you are going to process. You will pick the related batch on 500 screen. And as you see, then system will take you to different data entry screens. And based on the action you are taking, system will assign the different edit modes to each batch. Edit mode 0, it's pretty much shows it is just data entry only. And edit mode 1, it's master edit only. Edit mode 2, which is majority of all the transactions post to, it is edit and post. That means as soon as you're saving, your transaction is posting. edit mode 3, it is what we are going to cover pretty much today. It will be error detected. That means all the system generated batches, usually users will not see them because they just created by system and will clear over nightly batch cycle without like before pops up on 530 screen and user sees it. Only time user will see these system generated transactions on the 530 screen, it's when they errors out and assign edit mode 3 on them and pops up on 530 screen next day because of the errors is carrying. And then edit mode 4 are the transactions waiting for some approval or payment. So here's a different timing of the posting for different edit modes. So edit mode 0, data edits, and it's like during the nightly batch cycle, and financial edits will happen again on nightly batch cycle. If it is edit mode 1, data edit will happen immediately, but the financial edits will happen during nightly cycle. Edit mode 2, again, which most of the R transaction goes with, that data edit happens immediately and post to financials immediately as well. That's why sometimes correcting some of these batches can be difficult because they already post, they made your cache negative, and all that fun part happens with it. So now let's dive in to each one of these batches and see how they will pop up and what happens and what we need to do. Before I start and dive in, I want to emphasize the purpose of this presentation is make you familiar with this all batch. And so you will know what is on 530 screen and what action you can take. But in other hand, SFMS team takes these batches as a high priority to make sure 530 screen stays clean. So we run multiple reports every single day to make sure we address all these batches and we communicate with agencies and help to dispatch clears. But if agency wants to be proactive and review the 530 screen, review dispatches when they're coming out with errors, covers that errors and reach back to SFMS analysts, that will just make process faster and easier. So let's start with batch type C, which they are cost allocation batches. These batches generate with T code 301 or 317 to allocate cost. This batch, again, users will not see them on 530 screen if they don't carry an error, but as soon as they some errors occurs, then it will pop up as edit mode 3. The agency can monitor these transactions, and usually errors on these transactions will caused by profiles. That means PCA, grant, project number, all of these profiles has wrong effective end dates or has some information is not matched to the data entry screens when users put the data in transactions screen. So then it's errored out. So a user simply can back to that profiles and update the profiles and request a release from your agency SFMS analyst for dispatch to be released. One thing I want to emphasize is that for all the system generated batches, please use F2 to review. That is very important because if users review these system generated batches with F11 and F4, it will assign the user's ID to that batch. So even if you update the profile, it can error back over nightly cycle. Always make sure to review all the system generated batches with F2. So back to in batch, which is deposit reconciliation batches. As we know, our deposit reconciliation happens in 3 steps. And third step is generating T code 332. these batches will pop out on 5:30 screen if they carry any errors, and they will be on edit mode 3. The batches will be on the 5:30 screen under agency 999. So on your day-to-day 5:30 screen for your agency, probably you will not see any batches. If you want to monitor them, make sure you put agency 999, and you need to use user class 48. If you address the errors, update the profiles, please reach out back to your SFMS analyst so they can release the N batches. An important note is if it is any errors related to prior biennium appropriation numbers, then we have been seeing a lot of this lately happens. And then your agency analyst will work with you to temporarily update the appropriation number to make sure that batch will clear overnight, and we will immediately recover the appropriation number. And then we have R batches, redemption, expiration. R batch will appears on 5:30 screen after warrant redemption transactions posted, and it would be with T code 390. And if it carries edit mode 3, it will be on 5:30 screen. Agency cannot directly update any fields, any codings on these transactions. If you need to update any codings, you may use 54A screen for update this type of transactions. We have instruction how to use 54A screen on our website, but if you run into any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to your agency analyst to send you the direction. And when you covered all the errors, please reach out back, send a request to your agency analyst to release the batch for you. And one of our most popular ones are W batches. This happens when warrant is canceled, stop pays goes through, and T code 380 for to liquid, and T code 385 for canceling the warrants. And again, these usually users will not see these transactions if they don't carry any errors on them. But if you see them with edit mode 3 on 5:30 screen, simply with F2, review these transactions, you will see the errors, update the profiles related to the error, and you can send a request to your agency analyst. The agency cannot change the transactions on the 5:30 screen, but must temporarily revise the profile screen to allow this transaction to process. And some of these W batches are general fund related and for prior biennium. In that time, you need to, if you have the instruction, so you know what to do, but usually we have a specific guidance on how this can be handled to revert the fund back to the general fund. So usually your agency analyst, SFMM, your agency analyst will send you an email if there is any general fund W batch related to prior biennium on your screen. On that, I want to note, please make sure to loop back to your agency analyst, because we keep that as a pending, and we will not close the case until we receive reply back from agency regarding how they pursue the follow-up. So please make sure you always close the loop with your analyst and let them know which step did you take or what option did you pick. Then we have payroll batches, type 8. Type 8 batches post with T code 850. And on this T code, some of the transactions agency can modify, but the only change SFMS operation staff can update it is effective end date. That's the only one we have access to update. And here is the error you will see if users use F11, F4 to review dispatches. It is T-code/user class errors. So if you see these errors, that means system stamped the user's ID on the transactions on the batch. So system has a hard time with processing this batch. Usually batch type 8 will release automatically over nightly batch cycle if you address the errors either on the transaction or on your profiles. So here's are the list of the fields agency can update these transactions with T-code 850. And the other payroll batches we have, it's type 9, which is statistic transactions, and they post to T-code 599. You can review these batches again and address the error, but it will not automatically clears or release from your 530 screen. Please make sure you will release it with user class 17. This batch type is only one. I think agencies can release it themselves. So you can release it from your 530 screen with user class 17. Any questions?
Maria, this is Liz. I did have one go back when you were talking about the R batches.
Okay.
For those, only your SFMS analyst can make corrections. So when it says corrections are made from the 54A screen, if you need a correction, let your analyst know. Only analysts have the security to make changes on those. So an agency, if you tried to go to the 54A screen and change it, you would get an error. So just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. I'm sorry about that, Mrs. Spocken.
There are no questions that have come in, Maria. Thank you very much.
Great. So we have Alan next. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Maria. All right, my name is Alan Park, and I'm here to talk about the process to follow if your agency needs to pick up an expedite warrant. Okay. Okay, I maintain a spreadsheet of authorized signers for SFMA warrants, and this spreadsheet has two purposes. If agencies want to have a person sign for and receive the warrants from the DAS publishing and distribution shuttle driver, the shuttle driver uses this spreadsheet. Many agencies have a secure drop-off location for the shuttle driver to deliver the warrants, so some agencies don't actually need to have a person signed for the warrants. The second purpose is when an agency produces an expedite warrant in SFMA and they want to send someone to publishing and distribution, to pick up the warrant that afternoon, the person they send must be on this list of authorized signers. Please email me if you need to make any updates to your authorized signers for warrants. Slides are not forwarding here. 1 second, please. Okay. So on April 1st of 2022, we made the following changes to the expedite warrant process. The expedite cycle changed from 12:30 to 12 noon. The expedite batches must still be released prior to noon. If requested, expedite warrants can be picked up between 2:45 and 3:30 p.m. from DAS Publishing and Distribution. Their address is 550 Airport Road Southeast in Salem. So if you want to have someone come and pick up an expedite warrant that afternoon, so an SFMA warrant authorized signer must send an email request before noon and identify who will be coming to pick up the expedite warrant. The email should be sent to the following three folks: Ben DeHoda, Steve Knight, and Vernon Kilmer, all from DAS Publishing and Distribution. And it's important to note that they need to receive that email before noon. Otherwise, the expedite warrant will automatically be put in the next agency's next shuttle, whether that be that afternoon or the following day. So where to pick up the expedite warrants? The person picking up the warrants must ring the buzzer at the glass shuttle sliding doors, show their state ID, and sign for the warrant. And this is a map showing the location of the P&D building. It's located east of Airport Road. Now, in this example, the authorized signers for Agency 107 show as Fabiola, myself, and Liz Schultz. So with the list of authorized signers as shown here, Fabiola could request P&D to set aside an expedite warrant for Alan or Liz to come and pick up in the afternoon. Any questions about the expedite warrant pickup process?
We had one comment, Alan. Somebody thinks that maybe Steve should be removed from the list of signers. So Steve, I'm sure we'll look into that and double check on those names.
Yes,
and
thank you. I will check on that.
We'll move on from there. Also, I just want to make a throw out to Liz or Rose. I see Sandra Myers has a note in the chat regarding Oregon buys and mismatches. If one of you could perhaps respond to her in the chat, I think that would be great as we move along here onto other topics. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you. So up next is Carlene to talk about 1099 updates.
Thanks, Alan. That was great information on expedited warrants. 1099 season is upon us. We're not quite done, although some of you, some agencies probably are. I haven't been getting a lot of questions, so you guys did a really great job this year. Oh, it's not moving forward. Okay. I'm going to go over quickly the calendar of events, basically January, where if you have not pulled down your finalized DAFR 7940 reports off the electronic reports, please do so. They are still, I believe, available and out there as they were produced on the 12th, and they are readily available for 30 days. The EO99 reports were also produced and available for viewing on the, I believe it was the 17th, on the 17th. And so again, those are the employees with reportable comp objects. And then 1099s were produced and distributed in the and out in the mail. I'm starting to get some back, so you may get contacted by me with bad addresses and or any questions that the vendors may have that I can't answer. And the 1099 NECs were successfully reported to the IRS and DOR by the end of the month. That being said, we still have productions in February with reporting, March with reporting. Let me see if I can get this to go. But really what I want to talk to you today about is a brand new form out there. This has been discussed a couple of times in asking if there was a form to request 1099 copies that you may receive from vendors reaching out to you. And we finally have a form for that. It's a pretty simple Word document form with, so all you need to do to complete this form, let me slow down just a skosh, is it's called the 1099 copy request form. It is out on our website, currently posted out on our website. It's pretty simple. What we do is there's a request date, and you click or tap this box, and you can either pull it in by calendar or type in a date that you're requesting it. I'd like your agency number of who's requesting it, just so I can kind of track who's getting the requests, and then requested by. I'm hoping that these are the authorized contacts. I really like to stay with my authorized contacts for 1099s. The people that have been through my classes have the most knowledge in the agency. I understand that sometimes with turnover, that can't be helped because the classes are only held once a year. Then the body of the request is pretty simple. I want to know the vendor number, vendor name, and there again, it's a tap and enter box. The tax year requested. DAS maintains currently tax documents through the 2019. So if they need it all the way back, then please let me know that they need it from all the way back. 1099, I need to know if it's a miscellaneous, NEC, or both. These are strictly a click box, so it's pretty simple. I tried to make it as simple as possible. Does the vendor want it mailed? And this year's brand new box is email. If it is mailed, please confirm with a simple yes or no if the address on the 52 screen is correct. If it is, if it is correct, hit yes. If it is not, then please type in here to correct that address. And then if it's an email, then I need an email address stated below. So in this example, I gave you the vendor here. It's 123 Accounting LLC. We want 2023 tax year. They want an NEC and they want an email, and here is their address. Like I said, it is SFMS will no longer accept email requests. That's how I've been getting them in the past, is an agency would put this in an email and send it to me. I don't want an email anymore. I want this form completed and forwarded to me. And you can find it under the forms document on our SFMS website. And any questions regarding that new form? I did try to make it as simple as possible, so so hopefully that wasn't too horrible.
Carlene, we do have a question that came in. It says we're starting to receive 1099s ourselves. Where should those be forwarded?
They're starting to receive 1099s. Can you expound on that?
Kat, who are you receiving these 1099s from? What type of entities? Is it for payments
Are they being sent to the agency for the agency? Are they, because if it's 1099s that I deal with that are being the MISC or the NEC, those should not be returned to the agency. So did the agency itself send out 1099s? Sullivan Inc. Yes, 1099Ks. This is the question I've been getting a lot from a lot of agencies. The state of Oregon is not a reportable, is not an agency that is required by law to report to the IRS taxes. Like I, as an individual, have to report my income to the IRS. State of Oregon is a government entity, and by IRS codification, we shouldn't be receiving these, but if they send them to us, what I have a tendency to tell the agency is make a file, keep it in the file, keep it for 6 years, and then you can destroy it. There you go. I don't want them. Please don't send them to me.
All right, Kat, I hope that answers your question. If not, feel free to reach out to Carlene directly. That's all we had, Carlene.
Okay. 6 years, taxes for 6 years. Yeah. Tax documents, 6 years. General rule of thumb. Okay, my next topic, because, you know, not one new form is not enough for me. I want to give you another one. So let's talk about Treasury account closure requests. Here again, I've been receiving these for years in an email format. And this is just going to make it easier on us, a little bit more uniform across the state for how the requests come in. So basically, again, I'm wanting a D23, what date you're requesting this, the agency number, who's requesting it by, and this really needs to be an accountant 3 or higher within your agency, not unlike who is authorizing a D23 of themselves or requesting a new treasury fund. Should be right around that classification. We want the treasury account number that you want to close, and then any and all opened associated D23 accounts that not only you want to close, but we need to be able to do our due diligence against it. So just list all of the D23 funds associated with the with the treasury fund you want closed. Now, this can also be used for requesting a D23 closure without a treasury fund being closed. So if you have a D23 fund that perhaps is associated with the general fund, we can't close the general fund for obvious reasons because we all use it. World's biggest slush fund. Everybody has their uses for that. So if you want to close an account that you're no longer using, you don't have to list the treasury account. If it's just a D23, you can, but we won't close it if it's a general fund. But you can list multiple accounts here, and then any associated D73 cash fund we would request also be listed here, and or NA or blank if your agency does not use it. Okay, SFMS will no longer accept email requests to treasury accounts or D23 close requests starting today. Now that we've introduced this form, I want you to use the form. If you do send me one that's through an email, I will be sending you a link to the form and request that the agency complete the form. The form is still, like the other form, is located on the SFM website. And here are some other little side tidbits. It's recommended by SFMS that all eligible D23s and D73s be closed at the same time that a treasury account is being closed, because there's no purpose for it to be open any longer if the treasury fund is closed. Treasury accounts 0401 general fund and 0539, which is lottery, are statewide treasury accounts and will not be closed. But the D23 funds can be closed if no longer in use. All previous rules still apply for closure. Treasury account must be 0. The D23's funds to close have to have all real account GL balances at 0. The exception being the equity accounts. Those can have a balance. No outstanding warrants, which is GL accounts 1011 and 1111 to have balances on it, because that indicates that there is a balance in treasury for this account and that there is an outstanding warrant that we're waiting to be cashed or worked through the system. And D23 funds with capital constructions are up, which are, you can see, are appropriated funds 3020, 6020, or 8020 will remain open and active due to financial archive ramifications. And that's been a hard and fast rule for a very, very long time. Anyway, please submit these completed forms to the D23 SFMS at dasoregon.gov for processing. Any questions regarding the new Treasury account close form?
Just a couple quick things, Carlene. Just want to clarify, you want both of those forms that you've just now covered, the 2 new forms, emailed to your distribution mailbox, correct?
Treasury fund and D23 fund to go to the D23 email box that we've had set up for what, 2 years now, Fabiola or Liz? And I'd like the 1099 copy request form to come to my email box. I'll deal with
Personal. All right.
that. Yes, please.
And then there's a question, will there be a form for Treasury account opens or rejected requests, or are emails still okay?
Emails for those are still okay. I probably coming to a theater near you. I'm not announcing anything, but yes, that form will probably come forward as well. Just because of it, not yet. We will announce it when it's ready to go.
All right.
So
thank you very much, Carlene. And Fabiola, do we want to go ahead and take a break at this time?
Yes, we do. Thank you, Julie.
So
thank you, everyone.
I think I was going to jump in and add, we're taking a 5-minute break and we will be back in 5 minutes. So go get some coffee, go stretch your legs, and we will be back in 5 minutes. Okay. Juan, you're up next with the payment control and cancel archive. Welcome back, everybody. We're starting again.
Okay, thanks, Saviola. Okay, so I'm going to start with the payment control cancel archive. This is just a short presentation. The purpose of the payment archive is to remove records within the payment control and the payment cancel table that meet the archive criteria. The archive of warrant records this year include expired warrants, warrants canceled before July 1st, 2021, warrants stopped before July 1st, 2021, warrants redeemed before July 1st, 2021. Let me move this here. Okay, this is what I'm reading now. And this job runs every year. And this year is scheduled to run on Thursday, February 22nd. There should be no system downtime. There's no agency responsibility for this archive. The most visible change will be on 44 and 47 screens. Archived warrants will not be accessible. This archive is necessary to maximize system efficiency and minimize data storage needs. Any questions on the payment archive?
We do not have any questions, Juan. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a short presentation. And now we have Alan with the next topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan. Okay, let's see if I can work this a little better than last time here. I apologize for my earlier issues. Okay, so I'm back to talk about the financial archive. Okay. So first, the good news, there's no agency responsibility. Friday, April 5th will be a normal day. There will not be any system downtime. The bad news, if you are planning to work on Saturday, April 6th, the IT file will be shut down while we begin our archive validation process. I'll explain what it means to have the IT file down in a couple of slides. Well, on Monday, April 8th, we will be canceling the noon expedite run. The IT file will be shut down until we can complete our archive validation process. We plan to run a batch cycle Monday night. We'll be sending out an SFMS news announcing when the system is available. So what does it mean when the RSTARS IT file is closed? Well, you can view and update profile screens and use the financial inquiry and drill down screens in RSTARS. You cannot create, edit, or release batches if they're on the 530 screen or enter a new batch. So AdPix, is AdPix impacted by the financial archive? At the end of December last year, SFMS requested SARS system security to inactivate all agency users with update capability in AdPix. After that change, no transactions can be created in AdPix and therefore cannot be sent over to post in RSTARS. So because of this change in security, AdPix is no longer impacted by the financial archive. So this year, we'll be archiving fiscal year 2020 financial records, with the exception of protected capital construction records that Fabiola mentioned earlier on. So this slide shows the 13 tables and the associated RSTARS screens included in the financial archive. For example, the cash control table, which is viewed on the RSTARS 63 screen, I'm sorry, I'm seeing some issues here.
It appears that there's a few people who are not seeing the slides advance, but lots of people are. So if you are having that issue, you might want to duck out and come back in, or we sent the presentation slide deck out via email, and you can follow along on that email version. Thank you, Alan.
All right, thank you. I should be displaying slide 62 right now. Is that what
That is
are
what
you
I
seeing-
see advanced to, yes.
Oh, okay, great. Well, I apologize for those that are not seeing slide 62, but as Julie said, we did send out, or will be sending out, the slide deck. So, all right. So the cash control table is viewed on the 63 screen, and will be. It's not protected for capital construction, so all fiscal year 2020 cash control records will be archived. Another example, the inactive accounting event table, which is viewed on the RStars 84 screen, is protected for capital construction. So some inactive accounting event records in fiscal year 2020 and older will not archive. And I'll walk through an example of a protected capital construction record in just a couple of slides. So advancing to slide 63. So the archived financial records from 7 tables are loaded to special tables in the data mart for an additional 2 years. Those tables can be queried in OBI-EE. They all begin with the table name SFMS-archived, so they'll be easy to find. All right, so I mentioned the term capital construction. Now I want to walk through an example of that. This screen print shows an inactive accounting event transaction with an effective date of September 2013, which is fiscal year 2014. In order to understand why this record is still in RStars, we need to take a look at the D23 fund profile for Fund 1589. So the D23 profile for Fund 1589 is set up with an appropriated fund 3020. There are 4 appropriated funds identified as capital construction. Those 4 all end in 20, 3020, 4020, 6020, and 8020. Each agency that has capital construction will have a system parameters profile created and maintained by SFMS staff that identifies the oldest appropriation year and the range of fiscal years to be protected from archiving. SFMS staff review the capital construction information every 2 years and update these system parameters profiles as needed. There are currently 19 agencies with capital construction profiles protecting a range of transactions from archiving. Now, the normal time frame for a capital construction is, as Fabiola mentioned earlier, the normal time frame is 6 years, but there are some exceptions to that, and some are extended quite a ways. So, and finally, this slide gives you a glimpse of the number of records combined in the 13 financial tables. After our archive last year, there was nearly 700 million records remaining. So we have run this archive for many years. If we didn't run this archive, our system would be much slower with all the additional data and would be more expensive to operate with all those extra records. And that is one of the primary reasons SFMS dedicates resources to run our various system archives. Are there any questions about the financial archive?
I have not seen any come in, Alan. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. And up next, Julie, you're to talk about the profile archive.
That's me. Thanks, Alan. Okay, so now we are going to go into another system job, which is the profile archive job. So what is the profile archive? This is the job where we go in and clean out unused and unnecessary profiles out of the system. We do this every 2 years, just like the same purpose as the financial archive. We do this to minimize our server space and therefore keep our storage costs down, data storage. There's a side benefit to this. You don't have as many profiles to page through if you're trying to find a specific one that you don't have information on. This archive is going to occur on May 22nd this year. And as I said, it runs every other year. It runs in the even number years, while the profile roll runs early in odd number years to create profiles for that upcoming AY and underlying FYs. So odd numbers, we add profiles, and even numbers, we get rid of old profiles we don't need anymore. How are the profiles selected for the archive? It depends on the type of profile it is. So there are 3 profile types we look at. AY profiles, what that means is in the key of the profile, like after you enter your agency, there'll be a field for the AY. If that's the case, that's an AY profile. Examples are appropriation profiles and PCA profiles on the 20 and the 26 screen, respectively. The second type of profiles are fiscal year profiles. This just means instead of having the AY field in the profile key, it's an FY field. Example, the D23 fund has an FY indicator. Finally, the effective end date profiles. So these profiles have neither an AY or an FY in their identifying key. And so we determine which of these to archive based on their effective end dates, which are at the bottom of your profile screens. Examples here would be the 27 and 29 project and grant profiles. So now based on these types, we determine which to archive. For AY profiles, if the appropriation year in that key is less than or equal to 2019, we will be archiving it this year. Similarly, for FY profiles, if that FY is less than or equal to 2020, we will be archiving that profile. And for the effective end date profiles, if your effective end date on the profile is less than or equal to 6/31 of 2020, that profile will be archived. Note about the status code on these profiles. The archive doesn't care whether they're active or inactive. It's actually irrelevant. The archive strictly looks at these date criteria. If they match that date criteria, it will be archived regardless of the status of the profile. An exception is always, and similar to the financial archive, capital construction records, we really protect those. And if there's a capital construction records that are being protected within these date ranges, then we are going to retain all the profiles for that period so that we know that, you know, the capital construction records are all going to remain as long as they need to. This is a table of which FY profiles, and then you can see a lot of them are the effective end date profiles. There's a few recommendations that SFMS has for this archive for the agencies to take. Number 1 is review your effective end date profiles. So if you have old effective end date profiles and that effective end date field is blank, they're not going to be archived. So if you have any old profiles out there that you're not using, it's a great opportunity to go in there and stick a date in there, you know, of June 31st, 2020 as its effective end date, and we'll get rid of it, this archive. So take that action if you have any cleanup that you'd like to get done for those profiles. Number 2, you can print your agency's profile reports. It just kind of gives you a nice place to look at, you know, the pre-archive and post-archive. SFMS, we run a lot of reports, obviously, to look at the results before, what the population looks like before the archive, and then to compare it to the results after the archive. We do a lot of verification there. But if you want to have any of those kind of records for your agency level, you can do that. There's a DAFQ 0340 that you could utilize for this purpose. And your final responsibility is if you have any questions, issues, or concerns, to call your SFMS agency support analyst. Are there any questions about the profile archive? I don't see any, so I'm assuming everybody knows all about the archive. Love it. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce Juan again to take control, and he's going to cover the vendor purge. Juan?
All right, so I'm back. I'll take in control this time again. And this time I'm going to talk about the vendor purge 2024. And the vendor purge program removes unused vendor profiles from the tables in RStars and 3 tables in AdPix. This year, the vendor purge is scheduled to run on May 14th with no agency responsibilities, no anticipated system downtime. SFMS should open at its normal time on Wednesday, May 15, 2024. This table you'll see in this table you see the approximate record count before the purge in 2024, and you can see the 3 different screen numbers for each table. On screen 52, the system-wide vendor profile will see approximate count 100,299. On screen 51, the vendor mail code profile 112,266. On screen 3A and 3N, the vendor alpha vendor number inquire screen 378,443. On the AdPix side, on 5200 screen, the vendor table maintenance, we have 6,790. On screen 5150, the vendor address table maintenance, 699. On the 1200 vendor table inquiry, 18,230 approximate count. So the logic that the program uses to purge the vendors in stars is that if the vendor number or mail code does not exist on an accounting event transaction and the last process date is greater than 1 year older than May 14, 2023, or the last process date is less than 1 year and the profile status is inactive, they will purge. Additional vendor profiles that will purge include all search names related to a 51 profile that is being purged, the 52 profile and related search names if all mail codes for a vendor are being purged. In the prior page, we saw the purge logic. In this page, we will see the retention logic. If any of the following are true, the vendor profile will not purge. The vendor number or mail code does exist on an accounting event transaction. The last process date is less than 1 year and the status is active. It is a foreign vendor, those vendors numbers that begin with the number 2. It is an agency vendor profile. Vendor number begins with 0. The mail code 000, the 52 profile, and any related search names will be retained if any other mail codes for that vendor qualify to be retained. Here we have the vendor purge for AdPix. On the 5200 screen, vendor table maintenance, vendors on 5200 screen that are found on the RStars 52 screen purge file will be purged. On 5150 screen, vendor address table maintenance, vendors mail codes on 5150 screen that are found on RStars 51 screen purge file will also be purged. Some of the records on AdPix and in 1200 screen have mail codes and some only have vendor numbers. Records with a mail code go through a different process than records without a mail code. In this little table here, we see some vendors have mail codes, but others don't have mail codes. That's just an example here. Here we have the AdPix vendor purge logic for screen 1200. On 1200 screen, vendor profile will mail code will be compared with vendor or mail codes to be retained in the 5150 screen. So records that match will be retained. Records that do not match will be purged. This vendor purge chart shows the different count of the years 2021, 22, and 2023 before and after, and the actual amount of vendors purged. What we want to see in that amount of vendors purged are somehow consistent. And we can see here that we have purged an average of 65,000 vendors every year. And any questions to the vendor purge?
We do not have any questions, Juan. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, thank you. And now we have Scott with the next topic. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Glad to be here. I don't see the slideshow on my screen right now.
Scott, have you taken control?
I've taken control, yeah.
Okay. And you
I'm
don't
not
have
seeing-
anything? All right, let me take control and I will just advance your slides for you.
Okay.
Here we are on your title slide for the 13 screen deposit research.
Mm-hmm. And so, with this, I'm just going to be running down on the 13 screen, giving everyone some useful tips that will hopefully allow you to use this and do your own deposit research. First thing I want you to know is that if you have the agency number and the deposit number, as long as the deposit is in R-stars, you will find that deposit by typing them into the fields you see on your right. It gets much more advanced than that, but agency number and deposit number, you will be able to look it up lickety-split. Next slide, please. But what if you don't know the deposit number? You will always need the agency number, but if you have the treasury fund or the account number, you can search by that, or better yet, if you have both treasury fund and account number, or you can narrow down this list so it's easier for you to find the specific deposit that you're looking for. Next slide, please. And so reconciling with treasury is going to need some more advanced features, like it's nice being able to search by the numbers, but that's not really useful. Well, if you want to reconcile a month and it's giving you everything for that account number, everything for that treasury fund, therefore we can also search from a specific date to a specific date. That'll pare down everything easier, make monthly reconciliations more manageable, and you can indicate reconciliation status like Y, N, and M, yes, no, and manual release. You'll be able to compare whether or not Treasury and SFMS have the same amounts as each other. If you type in Y into the status field, it will give you all the items that reconciled with the Treasury. So the Treasury amount and SFMS amount will be the same. If you type in N, and it'll give you all the items that either have $0 in that do not match with Treasury or SFMS. That means the amount is either in SFMS and not Treasury, or it's in Treasury but hasn't been reconciled with SFMS. Next slide, please. So how do we find bit buckets? It's a pretty simple process. Press F2 deposit detail, you'll go to the 15 screen. Then you press F2 86 deposit transaction inquiry, and you will be able to find bit buckets from there. The thing about the E15 screen is that once you've selected your deposit, it will give you the underlying documents for that deposit. If it's more than one, I can guarantee you that one of those two will be a bit bucket. Next slide. Of course, that's kind of like saying, and if you flip a coin, I can guarantee you'll arrive at either heads or tails. So how do we figure out which is which? It's from the 86 screen, you then select the transaction to drill down to the 84 screen, and then search for the approval date in the lower or right hand corner. So sorry for that error. And if the approval date is after the reconciliation date on SFMS, there's your bit bucket. There's what you need to correct. Next slide, please. So I know we covered a lot in a short amount of time. Are people feeling comfortable with this screen that they see right now? Please raise your hand. Okay. All right then. And so far we have 6 people, 7. And next slide, please. Any questions so far? I know I blazed through that, so I appreciate anyone speaking up.
Scott, we did have a question come in. It's, can you explain a bit bucket and why? So I know that the bit buckets is basically just because you've got 2 SFMS or SFMA, excuse me, entries with the same deposit number. Is that correct?
That's my understanding of it. Yes, there are Treasury side and SFMA side bit buckets, which basically just means where is the duplicate deposit number coming from and who needs to correct that. This 13 screen will help you with SFMA bit buckets, Treasury bit buckets. It's have their own process that we will potentially be discussing at a later date. Thank you.
Right. So Gina, what happens is if you have the deposit reconciles with Treasury, if an agency enters another transaction with the same deposit number, then it's not going to reconcile with anything. There's not going to be another Treasury entry for it to reconcile with. So we'd have this entries kind of hanging out there. And so we look for bit buckets and make sure they get resolved. Thank you for that question. So Scott, I think you have the next topic as well. Let me go ahead and advance.
I do.
Now you're going to go into the DAFR 6620 agency balance sheet.
Of course. I won't introduce myself, but that's to be expected. How comfortable are we all with the balance sheet? Do we remember our coursework from our accounting classes, or do we remember or all the bookkeeping we had to do when we got started. And I think if you've done this for or long enough, this needs an introduction, but if you still need an introduction, just remember our assets plus liabilities equal fund balance. Next slide, please. So, the DEFR 6620 can be ordered to cover the appropriation year, a defined period, or a range of dates, which means you can order it for the whole appropriation year. You can order it a specific date just to figure out what account balances are on that date, or you can order it for a range of dates like month by month. Next slide, please. And it's requestable by all, so you can order it today, you can order it tomorrow, or you can set it up for every month just to keep track of those fund balances and what's going in and out of the accounts. Next slide, please. Level options are a bit more complicated. I didn't want to have this be too cluttered, but for ordering this, you can order it at the agency level. That's the only organizational level you can order it at. So be aware you can't order it for the whole state government. If you want another agency's information, you're going to have to ask that agency. So sorry. For fund level, well, you can specify whether you want it grouped by fund group, fund type, funds in general. Oh, and I should have been more specific. GAAP fund group, GAAP fund type, GAAP app fund, or just as fund. It's just fund. And for the GL accounts, these are split between account category, account class, comptroller GL account, or agency GL account. So, for this report, you can have it reflect how your agency does its own internal reporting, or how the comptroller would report on this, which makes these GL account options very helpful. Next slide, please. How many of us are familiar with this example? Like it's coming back to us. Oh yeah, the balance sheet. And I remember that. Like the great thing about this example is that it's comparative. It's got the current year, the prior year, or all the accounts you need, assets, liabilities, and fund balance. One thing to keep in mind when reading this is GL accounts 1 to 999 are assets, 1,000 to 1,999 are liabilities, and 2,000 to 4,000 are the fund balance accounts. So just keep that in mind if you're thinking, okay, why does this account seem high, or why does this account seem lower than the others? Next slide, please. You can also find this in OB. You just go to shared folders, repository, final, all DEFR 6610 and 6620. It should have the current year report and the prior year report on it. You can order it for any of the months, including month 13. If you need that information. Next slide, please. And in addition to having this be a question slide, I also want to point out 2 resources you can go to for further information. And in the links, we have the specific report guide for the DAFR 6620 and the chapter 1 of the report guide, so that you can review any of the basic information for navigating in this report. Or any questions before I move on?
We have not had any questions come in. Thank you, Scott, for covering the staffer report.
Thank you for your patience and for following along with that. Next slide, please.
All right, thanks, Scott.
And I believe Julie needs no introduction. And thank you so much for helping out with these technical difficulties, Julie.
Absolutely. All right, so I'm back, like it or not, here I am again. And this time we're going to talk about our favorite things we ever get to see, error messages. I bet lots of you have seen these error messages at least a time or two, and probably more than one of them. And sometimes they can seem really cryptic. You know, I mean, it tells you have an error message and it supposedly has a little title to it, but you still have no idea what the problem is. So we're going to take a quick look at some resources we have. First, we're going to talk about the different kinds of error messages. We have batch balancing errors. So if your batch is not in balance, what that's telling us is that either the count or the amount that you entered on your batch header screen, the 500 screen, is not matching what the system calculates that amount to be based on the transactions that you entered prior to hitting, balance the batch. Different things can happen to cause these things to not match. Maybe there was a transaction missed when calculating your entered amount, and so you need to change that entered amount, and maybe they match after all. Or perhaps you didn't use the absolute values of the transactions when you calculated your entered amount. Remember, when we're talking about a batch balance, we just look at the absolute value of the transaction amount. We don't care if it's a negative, a positive, what way it goes. We're just looking at absolute values and adding them all together. So generally speaking, when you have a batch out of balance, either there's a transaction that got entered twice or was missed entirely, or the entered data fields on the batch header need to be corrected because they were miscalculated. Those are usually one of those two situations. We also have document is not in balance error messages. This is that lovely one you see at the bottom of the screen. It'll say things like, VP 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is out of balance. So it's a similar kind of situation as a batch balance, except when you're looking at document amounts, that document amount is based on the net of all the suffixes under that document. So in this case, you are going to care whether it's a positive or a negative, and you can determine whether you should add it or subtract it by looking at the 28A screen for the T codes in your document. Here's an example of a 28A screen, and over here, there's an A/S doc amount. I never even knew what that meant. I had to look it up for this presentation, and it's highly technical. It means add, subtract. So in this example for T code 214, it is a negative. So you're going to subtract it from your doc amount that you're calculating. If there's a positive in there, you would add it to your doc amount. So the thing also to remember about these, if you use an R, if you're reversing a T code, then you're reversing that AS doc amount indicator as well. If somebody were to utilize a 214R, you would need to add that suffixes amount when you're calculating the doc amount that involves that suffix number. So again, if your document amount is not in balance, you want to look at all the suffixes for that document. Make sure you didn't miss a suffix when you entered your transactions or didn't duplicate a suffix when you entered your transactions. It's real easy for the I to miss a line or two when you're doing a large batch entry. So check those. If those seem right, check your AS indicator and then make sure that you have the signs going the correct direction when you were calculating your dock amount. Something we see probably more often are transaction errors. You can get these either when you are entering a batch, entering a transaction in edit mode 1 or 2. You'll remember when Maria did the system generated transactions, she talked about how there are edits performed based on what your edit mode is. So when you're entering in one of these edit modes, then you can get an error message across the bottom of your screen and you can't save the transaction until you resolve the error. The other situation, you can have edit mode 3 batches. So batches that have already gone through the batch cycle, they didn't have edits performed when they were entered, possibly an interface batch. So all of the edits are performed during the batch cycle and the system finds an error, kicks the batch out, and we have to identify what's wrong and resolve it. The suffix with the error can hold up an entire document from actually processing, because if we don't know what one suffix is, we can't send a payment out to a vendor type of a thing. And in the case of a payroll batch, it can hold up the entire batch. So you can have a very large batch that you have to identify the error for. So you have to isolate the transactions that actually have the errors on these edit mode 3 batches. And we're going to look at that in a little more detail in just a couple slides. Before we get there, though, I wanted to make sure everyone understands how you can get additional information about an error that you receive when you are entering a transaction. So we have an example here. I put this in the training region, and I actually have a whole bunch of error messages on this little fake entry I made. But if I type news in that link to field at the top of the R-Star screen and press enter, I will be taken to the online R-Stars help function. And you'll see it has my first error message listed there and a nice like paragraph style explanation instead of 10 characters that are cryptic that I can't figure out what they mean. So this is a great online help tool to get more information about an error message that you're receiving on the screen. After you've finished reading it, you can hit F9, interrupt, and it'll take you right back to your transaction screen that you were on before you linked to news. When you have an edit mode 3 batch, you can still use that online error message help functionality. But when you're in an edit mode 3 batch, you can actually just click on F1 help. It's an F key that you can utilize rather than having to link to news. When you press F1 help, it will again take you to that online help function. It goes to your first error message for that transaction that you were on. You can press F5 to just page through the online help functionality. Or if your transaction has more than one error, as my example does, you can press F8 to get the information on the next error that's on your transaction. Similar to the other time we used online help, press F9 interrupt, and that'll take you back to the transaction entry screen. So the online help functionality has a lot of information out there. Now, I said we would get back to how to isolate transactions that have errors when you're looking at edit mode 3 batch. Probably a lot of you already know this, but it's such a helpful tool. We wanted to put it out there in case there's anyone who doesn't know. On the left side, I have a 520 screen where we're looking at the listing of transactions within a batch. You'll see I'm starting with sequence 199, ending with 209. And all I know is in there somewhere, there's some error messages that I need to read and resolve. I don't know which ones they are. I don't want to open all these transactions and have to page through the ones that have no problems. The solution to that is up here, there is a field called errors I/E. Another real technical, reason here, it stands for include or exclude. So what it's referring to are errors. If we put an I in that field, then the system is going to filter out transactions that don't have errors. It's going to only include transactions that have errors. If you chose E, exclude, it would exclude the transactions that have errors, and you'd be left with a list of good transactions, which, you know, I guess it's nice to see that a bunch of transactions didn't have errors, but it's probably more usable to use your include option, the I there. And just as a result, you can see after it did some filtering, my list of transactions now goes from 199 all the way down to 230 because it took out transactions that didn't have errors. So it really limits the transactions I have to search through to find the problems. There's a couple error messages we wanted to just mention briefly here today because they are found quite consistently. The first one is an EQ8, invalid transaction code user class error. What this means is that the user is attempted to enter a T code for which they do not have an appropriate user class. Every user class tells the system what transactions that user is allowed to enter. In my example here, I have the online help feature for the EQ8, and so showing what that definition is for an EQ8 error. And you see that it mentions that you can look at the D66 screen, which is where the system has definitions of the transaction codes that each user class is allowed to use. I have an example there, user class 48. Important to note, this I, again, it's include or exclude. There could be an E there, big difference. So make sure you look at that indicator. This screen tells me that user class 48 includes all of those transaction codes. So they can enter those transaction codes, but those transaction codes only. Try another one, you'll get an EQ8 error. Another common reason we see this is with the payroll batches. You know, the first payroll batch establishes the expenditures that the agency has incorporated, and agencies can make changes to that batch. But then after that posts, we create the 857 T code for payroll, which is where the agencies actually pay DAS back for fronting the payroll. And agencies do not have access to making changes to the T code 857. If you go in to look at that batch with an F11 correct batch, you will what we call stamp your user class on the batch. Even though you don't change anything, you're just looking and you leave, you've put your user class on the batch, and it's going to get kicked out by the system because you don't have access or authority to use, make changes to the 857. So if you have this happen, just make sure you can let your SFMS support analyst know, and we can remove that user class stamp off the batch, and it can process the next batch cycle. The other error message we want to just mention is FB9. It's errors in splits. This error is related to use of RTIs. So if your agency doesn't use RTIs, you're off the hook. One less error message you'll ever get. But if you do, the problem is the 530 screen will only display the parent transaction and this FB9 error. It doesn't show the children, which are really where the error lies. So what you can do is utilize your DAFR 2151, the error report. And on that report, you will get, as the example shows, both the parent transaction and the children transactions and the additional error message that is truly the problem with whichever child it has that issue. In my example, you can see that there is an ECD PCA not in an active status code. So that really narrowed that down. We had no idea what was wrong until now we can go and address the exact problem. Wanted to give you a list of resources you can use when you have error messages that you have questions about. A couple of them that we've discussed, that DAFR 2151 RSTARS error report, the RSTARS online help feature that we went through by linking to news or just pressing the F1 help key, depending on where we were at to access. There are two different desk manuals on the topic, OTHE1 error correction, and I have a little summary there of what that covers. And also take a minute to check out the OTHE7 class mismatch. This is a great resource if you ever get a class mismatch because it lists all the data elements that have to match between your current transaction you're entering and the reference doc that you're referencing. Some of those don't show on the transaction entry screens. So it's a great resource to go and know which data elements you have to make sure are matched up. There's also a chapter in the training manual, chapter 7 for online help. And there's a section in that chapter called error code help. And of course, what list would be complete if I didn't list your SFMS agency supporting analysts? We're here to help. Give us a call, give us an email, and we'll see what we can do for you. All right, so I have a question. Is that difference from F1? I'm not sure, Joy, what you're referring to. I know that when we were looking at the online help feature, you could press the F1 key to get to the online help feature. Perhaps news versus F1. It's going to get you to this exact same place. It's just from where you're at when you want to go to the online help feature. If you're in a current batch that you're entering, you're going to want to link to news. If you're reviewing an edit mode 3 batch, then you have the option to just hit an F1 key to get there. Perfect question, though. Thank you. All right, and so we already kind of looked. Yes, I just wanted to let people know if you have an error message, shout out to us. We'll cover it in a future meeting. Go ahead, Fabiola.
Oh, sorry. There was a hand up, Julie. There wasn't in the chat, so that's the only thing I was saying. That I think Gina had her hand up, but she didn't put anything in the chat.
Oh,
or maybe not.
I think there's some hands raised when they were answering Scott earlier as well. So if you have a question, please throw it up in the chat and I'll try to answer it in the chat while Liz covers our next topic, which are user classes, which we've already kind of touched on. So Liz.
Thank you, Julie. And I want to be conscious of everybody's time. I know we're running a little bit over. If you can hang on for another 10 minutes, I'm going to go over user classes. If you have another meeting to go to and need to drop off, all the information I'm going to cover is in these slides. These slides have been emailed out to registered participants. They'll be posted on our website. So I'm going to get right into it. My name is Liz Schultz. This is the last topic on our agenda today, user classes. In SFMS, we do receive questions pretty regularly related to user classes and security. So I'm going to go over some background and a few common questions. And Julie, would you mind advancing the slides for me? I'm not able to take control. So if you could move to the next slide for me, that would be great. Thank you. All right, so let's start with a little bit of background. User classes are how security is managed through RStars. So depending on your user class, you will have access to view, add, or modify profile screens, and to view, input, modify, or approve transactions within the system. Every state agency, as required by the OAM, must designate an agency security officer and a backup to manage security on behalf of an agency. An agency security officer, or ASO, excuse me, may request SARS system security to add, modify, or delete user classes on behalf of the agency. It's important to note, we in SFMS do not set up user classes. All user classes are set up for SARS system security. There is a link to the SARS system security website on the bottom of this slide. If you click on this link, you can view the different ASOs for your agency, the forms used by ASO to request new or updated access. And there's also instructions on this website if you need to reset your password. If access has been revoked, you entered your password wrong too many times, you can use this website to reset your password. So there are a few different security screens. Next slide, Julie. These are different screens in RStars that can be used for system security. They're related to system security and give you some more information. So only certain user classes are permitted to view these screens. So if you try to go into RStars and you input this screen and you can't see anything, it means your user class doesn't give you access to see these security screens. So I'm going to go over each of these. The D66, which we've seen on some previous slides, this is what it looks like here. This shows for each user class what T codes or range of T codes a specific user class can use. We have the same information in our T code spreadsheet. If you don't want to go screen by screen and look at this, you can go to our website, and there's information about what T codes each user class has access to. Some user classes have inquiry only access, so they're not going to have the ability to use any T codes. Next slide, please. The 96A screen is the next screen that we use. If you have access to view this screen, you can input a user ID and a user class that have been set up. Each user class will be displayed on a separate screen, so you can press F5 to scroll forward. So if you have multiple user classes, you're going to have your user ID, and each separate user class that you have will have its own unique 96A screen. On the right-hand side of the screen, I've got a few indicators that are important to kind of keep a note of. The accounting transaction indicator, this one lets you know what level of access this user has. Can you only view transactions? Can you input transactions, or can you modify previously approved transactions? So if you get an error message that you cannot change a previously approved batch, it means that you have not been set up with an accounting transaction indicator that will allow you to change it. The release flag indicates whether or not a user can release batches or not. The D60 screen for that user class you're using to release the batch also has to allow the T codes within the batch, but this release flag controls whether or not you have that ability with that user class. The batch edit mode indicates what type of batches the user has been given permission to enter. Most of our users are going to be set up with a batch edit mode 2. That's normally what users are using when they input batches manually in RStars. For systems that interface, for example, Workday Payroll, Oregon Buys, they have an edit mode of 0. So they come over in edit mode 0 and then process overnight once they've been released. The final indicator I want to point out is the disbursement method. So we talked a little bit about expedite warrants earlier in today's training. If you need to expedite warrants, this is an important indicator. You have to have a disbursement method indicator of 3 to be able to expedite a warrant from the RStars 41 screen. Next slide. The 96B screen is another profile, and this one controls for each user ID and user class whether a user has the ability to view, add, change, or delete records on a specific RStars profile screen. So you can see we've got a bunch of different screens listed on this 96B profile. If the indicator to the immediate right of the screen number is blank, it means the user doesn't have access to even see the screen at all. If it's 0, the user has view-only access and can't make any changes. So I've got on the right here what those different indicators mean, the blank 0, 1, 2, or 3. So this may be useful if you need to see, can I make a change on the 026, the 26 screen PCA profile? If you had the ability, a 1, a 2, or a 3, you can make changes on that screen. Okay, another indicator we get a lot of questions about, back one more, Julie, thank you, is the WRP towards the bottom. If you want to be able to view PDF web reports online, we have our RStars DAFR reports website. You want to make sure that WRP indicator equals 0. If it's blank, you won't have access. Right, next slide. This slide just covers some of the most frequent questions we get asked here in SFMS with some answers to those. Again, if you need to change access, you need to go through STARS system security. If you need to reset your password, there's more information on the STARS website about that. And there's more information on the specific screens in our data entry guide, or if you're getting error messages related to security, you can contact your SFMS analyst and we can help you troubleshoot those. All right. Any other questions on the topic of user classes?
We do not have any questions showing, Liz. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. And I will turn it back over to Fabiola to wrap us up.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. I know we have our counts, so we always start our presentation with an icebreaker. Loretta, do you have our counts for the Super Bowl? If you were a sports fan, we took a toll of who we thought was going to win. But maybe not. We will have to get those for you as she's coming on. We do have 2 upcoming trainings. We have a vendor training on February 8th, and we have a direct deposit training on February 22nd. We hope you can join us for those trainings. And again, I think we just want to say thank you. Thank you, Loretta. So we had 6 for the Chiefs and 9 for the 49ers. And then I have another question. Will there be a training on the program alignment for 2027? Liz, yes, we would be having a program structure training, and we do that with Sabres. So we will send out information on that in the coming months. So thank you again. Have a good rest of your day. And we look forward to seeing you again in our next user group, which will be May 7th. And Julie, you can stop recording.